So today's interview is with Jen Gleeson. She works in animation. She's worked on the Patrick Star Show, Camp Coral. I'm reading this because I know I don't want to just say SpongeBob because it's Camp Coral, SpongeBob's Under Years. So we're going to hear all about that, all about her journey in animation, making sure that we find out how do you do it, how do you get into it. I always feel like there's hundreds and hundreds of names attached to these shows, but what do they all do? How do they do it? Because I don't know about you, but I love classic animation, Tex Avery, and my favorite cartoon is the Bugs Bunny What's Opera doc. And obviously, we all love The Simpsons, SpongeBob, all these guys, Ren and Stimpy. So we're going to speak to Jen. We're going to hear about her story, how she got started in it, and I'm going to put lots of examples of her work across the show as well. And you can check that out in the description. So next time you see me, I'll be talking with Jen. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to talk to you about animation. It's something that so many of us love and are really into, but we don't know a lot about what goes on under the bonnet, how it gets made. We just kind of enjoy it. So I'm really interested in your role. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, it's not a problem. I'm really happy to be here and talk your ear off about animation.
Oh, that's great. That's really good. Because we first met through horror, really. You were at the Nosferatu screening. So was there a kind of love of horror in terms of linked to your animation, or is there all just kind of you just love horror films as well as animation?
Yeah, I'd say it was more as well. I grew up watching sort of old Hammer films, Twilight Zone with my mum. My mum's a big horror fan.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, I grew up watching classic horror, and I especially love psychological horror. I wouldn't say it influences what I'm doing now, but
No.
it's definitely a creative influence.
Yeah, that's it. It's a bit, yeah, definitely. When you go to conventions and you see the artwork that people do, and even I know when we talked about Nosferatu originally, that he's made his way into SpongeBob a couple of times as well.
He has, yeah. He's a staple character now.
Yeah. I wonder how much of that is because you don't have to pay to use him, and how much of it is just like it's a really cool and funny thing to do. Probably a bit of both, I'd imagine. I don't know.
Yeah, pretty much. It was originally added because he was funny. It's a
Yes.
nice subversion, and he's just sort of. I think he just won over the hearts of the crew, and we do use him quite a lot. He's been in Camp Coral and the Patrick Show.
Right. Oh, wow.
Fortunately, I haven't got to work with him, but hopefully soon I will.
That would be so cool. That would be a real claim to fame, definitely. I'm really interested in kind of how we're going straight. I've kind of got excited and gone straight into asking about SpongeBob and Patrick Show and Patrick Star Show. But in terms of your history with animation, obviously you've had to. It comes from an original passion. So, like as a kid, was it just something you were always sketching, always drawing? Like what kind of set you off on this path? Was it something you were laser focused about?
For as long as I can remember, I've been really interested in animation. My auntie, Julie Gleeson, she's worked on quite a few animated features. She's worked on Balto, Space Jam, Fievel Goes West as a background painter. And
Oh, wow.
I'd go to her house and she'd show me all this stuff from when she worked in studio, and it just amazed me. Like actual cells from some of the films that she worked on. And
Oh, way.
she sort of provided insight into how animation's made. It's something I didn't really think about before. It's just, I just watch animation. It's just there.
Yeah.
But there's a hell of a lot of work that goes into it, and it's so. It was just so inspiring, and since then I've really wanted to work in animation in some form.
It must be. It must have been very kind of to see somebody in your family do it proves it's possible. Well, if they can do it, and that's somebody I know, rather than just some, somebody off in Hollywood doing something who it's a kind of an idea, but it's a distant one. To see somebody, like you say, Space Jam and Five Goes West. I'm looking through her list here. She's done Angelina Ballerina and
Yeah.
Wind in the Willows. Wow. Yeah. So that must be really, really cool to kind of have that as a real life sort of tangible inspiration. So from there, how did you go ahead with that kind of studying side of it? Was there a kind of you just did it all initially for yourself, and then eventually was like, right, I'm going to make this into a job?
I'm not quite sure, to be honest. You hear a lot of the sort of starving artist thing, oh, it's really hard to make a career out of animation. Not everyone's going to do it, no matter how, good you are, especially, being based in the UK where the animation scene is quite, I wouldn't say small, but it isn't sort of Hollywood where
Right.
it's more competitive. I just did it for the fun of it for a long time. I was originally going to go into sort of psychology. I thought psychology was interesting, and I was originally going to do it at uni. But I had a sudden change of heart, a sort of an epiphany. If I don't try, then I'd spend my entire life wondering, maybe I could be working my dream, and I took it, and I'm so glad I did.
Yeah, it must be really edifying to kind of feel that you're doing something that you love. That's what everybody wants, and in particular if it's something creative, because a lot of the time we do something that we don't enjoy to be able to facilitate that thing that we that we do creatively as an outlet. But to be able to combine that with your career must be really exciting and really fun.
Oh yeah, I can't put into words how exciting it is, and it happened by complete accident, I'd say. I was found on Twitter by one of the directors of Kamp Koral, and he invited me to do a test for it. And I was working as a bartender at the time, and it was very challenging. I had 3 days to submit this test, and it all.
What did you have to do for that test?
So the first test was purely sort of illustrative. So they gave us 3 prompts, and we had to draw certain SpongeBob characters in those prompts. I can't remember the prompts now, but I've got the image on my Instagram. I'll send it to you.
Cool.
So I had to submit that, and then I had to do a storyboard test as well, where I had 3 days to. It was quite a big section, looking back at it, but I had 3 days to sort of just prove myself. And
right. So they were putting you under pressure straight away, really, to see if you could do that amount of work. Right. That's interesting. But I guess they've probably got lots of creative people, but maybe not always got creative people with drive as well to get things done. Is that a big part of it, that you have to really work to deadlines and be really laser focused to get stuff done?
Yes. There are long hours, sort of last few days before a deadline. I can be working like 12, 13 hours a day to get things done. You do need sort of the dedication and the passion.
Actually having to do something very, very precise for a long period of time is quite demanding, isn't it?
It is very hard. Some days you feel less sort of driven than others. Other days you just struggle to get anything out. You struggle to get anything out that looks right, and it can be really frustrating.
Kind of like writer's block almost.
Just struggling to draw anything that looks right, or what's in your head, struggling to get it down on paper.
I never thought about that kind of idea of you hear about writer's block, and like you say, that kind of idea of a starving artist sat trying to think about what, but that's just the same for people who in art, isn't it? In sort of in animation, where you might not want to feel like you want to draw that thing that day.
Oh yeah, there are days where you've got maybe a difficult section, it's crowd scenes, backgrounds. That's a big one as well. And some days you just, you really have to force it out of yourself, and it does feel like a job on those days. But then there's other days where you have a really cool section and you're drawing something really fun, and the day just flies by. So I'd say there are more good days than bad days, but those bad days are definitely bad days. They can be not as productive, and then it affects your timing down the line. It puts more pressure on you towards the end, sort of rushing to get things done before deadline.
Yeah, and obviously there's a high standard expected when you've gone straight in at the top end of the industry as well, where it's got a specific style already attached to it. But obviously, I imagine that there's room to kind of be creative within that as well.
Yeah, the show that I'm on now, it's very loose. There's a lot of animated shows that have a very strict model sheet, and they want the artist to draw, that model sheet to a T. Everything needs to be proportionate on model. The Patrick show is a bit more lenient with that. They allow more creative freedom, more funny poses. They just care about it being funny a lot of the time. Like the characters still need to be on model.
Yes.
But they allow more crazy faces and things like that, which I really like.
What sort of shows do have more of a rigid structure where you can't change too much, like just to compare the two?
I'd say a show like The Simpsons.
Right.
They have a sort of a book of rules that you need to adhere to for the characters. Like the characters can't be doing a certain expression or can't be drawn a certain way, and they're very strict with those rules. And all storyboard artists have to adhere to them, otherwise they get sent back.
So your role specifically, because obviously, like I said at the beginning of the interview, you see so many names attached to animation shows, more than any other. Sort of, how does your role fit into those? I take it a lot of those people don't meet.
Yeah, especially with COVID now, work from home has become more common in animation. So people will be working all over the world. Less people working in studio. I know on our team there are a few people who work in the Burbank studio, and then there are a couple who work around America, and then around the world as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, unfortunately, I haven't got to meet any of my co-workers in person yet. I'm hoping that will change soon.
How does that all come together? Because for me, that would be really hard. I sometimes have to try and get people from about 5 or 6 schools all together to do something, and I find it really tricky. So I can't imagine how to get hundreds of people together to make something that looks as amazing as the things you do.
To be honest, a lot of the work that we do is very singular. We don't really need sort of groups of people. We have Zoom meetings. That's how we all communicate.
So that's like with producers or people who are in charge of certain areas?
Yeah, so it's like pipeline almost. So it goes to one group of people, and then it goes to another group of people, and then it goes to another group of people. So I have never met some of the other people down the pipeline, background artists, character designers. I've never met them, and I don't really. My work doesn't really involve them. I just meet with the storyboard artist and our director, and that's all I see really.
So the director is it basically oversees everything, or is there a level above that again? Because obviously it's been going for so long, hasn't it? The franchise, that I'd imagine that there are people who are very ingrained in it, who've been doing it right from the beginning.
Yeah, we have a couple of people on the team who have been on the show since season 1, Spongebob. So veteran,
Yeah,
and veterans from other shows as well, like Ren and Stimpy.
cool.
So we have people who know what they're doing, and
Yeah,
they generally take on writers' roles, I believe. So they're higher up than us, and they oversee what we do, and
right.
tell us if we need to change anything or.
So what sort of inspiration when you're writing, and maybe how sometimes writers will go and read a book by someone in a similar style to kind of get in the mood, or watch a movie or something like that. What sort of animators or animation shows really kind of inspire you and get you kind of excited about what you're doing? Or it could be historically as well.
Quite a lot, I'd say. It's a big mix of shows I watched as a kid, shows that I discovered as an adult, and co-workers as well, because a lot of my co-workers have worked on shows that I love. Generally, I'll put a few cartoons on. Been watching a lot of Ren and Stimpy recently. I found myself analysing cartoons more, how they do certain things, how they animate certain things, and expressions as well. And I'll screenshot bits that I like and sort of study from them.
It must be quite fun to go back and look at those things and then try and unpick how they did it.
Yeah, I mean, looking at Ren and Stimpy now, it is really just a bastardization of old Tex Avery cartoons, Bob Clampett cartoons, and it really inspired by those old cartoons. And cartoons now are still inspired by the classics, Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry.
Like for me, when I was a kid, because I'm an old guy, but like we've got like I used to love the Droopy cartoons.
Yes.
And, moving how he'd move from one place to another, and you'd see everything, but it'd be really sped up. And like even things like you used to get some of the free ones that have gone out, like the old like Daffy the Commando. You get them on VHS and things like that. Even those are quite strange and kind of dark. I mean, like I use Daffy the Commando as an example because Hitler appears in that one. So...
I'm very familiar with Daffy the Commando because I believe it was on a collection of public domain cartoons that I had as a kid. So I watched it quite a lot.
Me too.
Yeah, I love that cartoon. I think it's one
very
of my
funny.
favorite. Yeah, it is. The slapstick is still spot on, especially Tom and Jerry. The sound design in some of the old shorts is just immaculate, and I'm very much inspired by how they handle sort of tooniness, I suppose.
Yeah, it's great that we can look at these things and they've not kind of been forgotten or left behind. And like you say, even if somebody's inspired by Ren and Stimpy, they're probably, even if they didn't know it, they're inspired by people like Tex Avery as well. It's that kind of incremental change, but also subverting it and making it even stranger and weirder. So when you're working on a project and you're kind of you've got your sort of tasks to do and you've got your day planned out and you need to do these things, what does like a day kind of look like for you?
Yeah, so generally for a typical section, we'll get about usually a week, and that time is we can use how we wish. So as long as it's in by a certain time, on a certain day, we pretty much left to plan our own time, which I really struggled with at the start. Because I'm awful at timekeeping and overestimating how much time I actually have.
Right,
I
right.
think it's a skill that I'm still trying to get a grips with. Generally, I try and structure my day.
Yeah.
I'll do sort of 7 to 8 hours of work a day. So I can take weekends off as I should.
Yeah, because you'll need that time to kind of get out of the bubble of doing it and kind of manage, sort of manage your own mental space as well, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
When it comes to doing finishing a piece of work and submitting it, I take it that's all done digitally. Do you ever get pieces of paper? Like what I'm trying to ask is, what does a finished piece of work look like for those people who are really interested in, how it gets done? What does a finished piece of work look like? Is it on paper? Is it digital? Is it a combination of the two? What does it look like? What are you handing in? Is what I'm saying, I guess.
So we're pretty much handing in a file. We use a program called Storyboard Pro, and we pretty much work entirely in that.
Right.
Sometimes, if I'm in the planning stages or I'm trying to work something out, I'll sketch on my iPad or sometimes a little notebook that I keep next to me.
Right.
But generally, it is all done on that one program.
Right. Okay. So so is it like you've got like I don't know, like a drawing tablet or something similar to that? Yeah. Right. Okay. Because I've got friends who work in the computer games industry, and they were always buying, and this is going back a long time when we were at university, but like they would be constantly buying the latest, the newest, the more, to be able to do it with a little more control or different types of strokes and things like that. And I could never keep up with it because, for me, what I did was just write. If I'm writing, I was just writing on an A4 pad. So like I'm literally still doing now, 25 years later. So that does that make it? Do you feel like the sketching part of it is still really important to most people who work in animation? They still use a piece of paper and a pencil to get their ideas out?
Yeah, a lot of people still love traditional. I know of a couple of people who will sketch on paper and then scan the sketches in and work from them.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah,
Is that
there is.
trickier then, or is that making their lives a bit harder, or is that?
I don't think so. I mean, they prefer sort of the feeling of paper, sketching on paper,
Right.
which I can understand. But it seems tiny bit more time consuming doing that.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
I
It made me.
prefer to just.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So you're actually of the generation, I guess, where you started using technology. Obviously, not as a like a little child, but maybe, I don't know. Were you sketching? So when did that start? Was that as part of your, because you studied design at university, so I'd imagine that where a lot of that used technology as well.
Yeah, so that's when I started using digital programs,
Right.
digital tablets. Before then, I just use the good old fashioned pencil and paper.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's where I got introduced to Photoshop, InDesign, programs like that.
Right. So was that something that you'd recommend for other people looking to get into animation, that's a really good grounding to actually go down the studying at sort of a university level or college level or online, or to do some sort of education self-education before you throw yourself into the industry? Or is there lots of different ways of doing it, I guess?
To be honest, I really didn't need to go to university. Sometimes I regret going.
Right. That's interesting.
Because the role that I'm in now, I didn't get because I went to uni. It was purely the stuff I did after I graduated. But I did enjoy the experience. There's opportunity to network. There's opportunity to get experience going to uni. But I'd say for animation, it's not needed. There are YouTube videos. There are industry artists you can talk to on social media.
Right. That's interesting. So it's quite an open medium then, in the sense of, sometimes I'll speak to filmmakers who are frustrated that they can't get the grants or the courses or the things that they want to go on to make films. So animation, would you say, is more open to new creators or people getting involved?
I'd say it is quite hard to break in to the industry. Right. University does help you learn sort of basics.
Right.
But I wouldn't say it was necessary.
But I'd imagine things are constantly evolving and changing anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to learn in an environment, where you're surrounded by other creatives and you're not just in your room, on your own. But
that's a good
people
point. Yeah.
can do that now. People can do amazing things from the room with technology. It's just getting yourself out there and getting noticed by other creators, which is the hard part, and landing jobs. It's very turbulent, the animation industry, especially at the moment. It's difficult, but it's not impossible.
No, there doesn't seem like there's the kind of almost like a class-based system of getting sort of things from the BFI or whoever it is. It's a more of it's not just like Britain, but you can kind of, like you say, tap into different people from around the world. More of a global enterprise. I guess when you see old episodes of The Simpsons and you see so many names that are clearly from all around the world, and you think, wow, all these things have gone together to make this 23 minutes or 24 minutes of animation. Do you think that as time goes on, there will be any more big sort of shifts? Because obviously with now things digitally and working remotely and all of these things that we've discussed, do you think that like your role, the things that you'll be expected to do as you continue in your career, do you think that will change much? What do you think do you think there'll be any big shifts in the industry?
I mean, I like to remain optimistic, and sort of the pandemic has definitely made working from home a lot easier. But the industry at the moment, with sort of layoffs and strikes and it's been quite difficult, and with the rise of AI as well, it's really hard to predict where the industry will go.
Right. What do you think about that then, the AI side of things? Is that something that excites you, worries you, or a bit of both?
It definitely worries me. I don't think it really should have a place in the creative industry. I don't think AI can be as nuanced as a human, when it comes to crafting a story, composition. But then again, these studios are sort of seemingly finding being optimistic about it.
It feels very corporate, doesn't it? And it feels very like pushing people out to a certain degree. It's a bit like when the voice actors on The Simpsons wanted a raise, and they were all in it together, and they were like, well, we'll just get rid of them all and bring in brand new people. Obviously the acting side of it, I'd imagine they get a lot of money, and they were still kind of feeling that they weren't being getting the amount that they deserve for what they were doing. I'd imagine the same goes for, there's somebody sat in a building somewhere thinking, well, we'll just replace this person with AI, or we'll just replace, and that's when it gets scary, isn't it? Because it just like, it isn't, like you say, it doesn't have, it can pass all those tests, but it can be 99% right, but it can't be that human. It can't have that sort of creative flair or touch or idea or little touch of insanity that's needed to make something amazing. So yeah, I hadn't even thought about that as being a challenge in animation, but of course it is. It is going to be with anybody in any artistic realm. And I guess, what are you saying about the strikes as well? So working with people who are in those unions, has that been a challenge as well?
Luckily, the strikes haven't really affected us.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Nickelodeon. But I, fully stand with everyone who's striking, and especially if animation decide to strike again next year. I think it's for, just reasons. They deserve better pay, more stable employment.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think if you look at it like, sometimes the spin that's put on things is, the way that the sort of people will be putting on that is that, multimillionaire movie stars, but actually what the concern is for people who are just trying to have a living wage, or trying, to scrape by. Those people are not really discussed as much, except for the people who are on strike. But the people who are outside of that, those, they're kind of going, oh, well, why are we striking? Why does Tom Cruise need my money? Or why does and you're like, well, that's not really the point. The point, you've completely missed it. And I guess that it's a bit like politics in that sense, with this spin put on all of these things which aren't actually actually relevant at all. So I'm really interested in to see how that goes, because I guess that the strikes and AI are kind of tied in together, really, aren't they? It's that corporate, mentality, and making sure that people actually are able to survive and live and enjoy and create, which is obviously something that we can all get behind. But sort of back to you, if somebody was wanting to make a start and kind of, wanted to get into the industry, and watching this interview and thought, wow, that's so cool that she's doing that, I'd love to do that, what sort of advice would you get just for making that start, just for getting involved?
The biggest bit of advice that I can give is just get your work out there. Start social media, post your artwork, get in touch with other artists, make friends who are artists.
I guess that's what goes back to what you were saying about being surrounded by other creative people. It makes you better, doesn't it? And it also helps you get those opportunities. So that social side of things and getting things out there, do you mean like maybe setting up a website, or on Twitter or Facebook, or what would you say is the best way for people to do that?
Yeah, all of them. Just spread your work, wherever you can. Show it to anyone who's willing to look at it. Because people will take notice, and they will see, that you're passionate. And it does take a while for people to, like, it took me a while to build up my following. It's still quite small, but I did start to get noticed by people in the industry just by being in the same circles as them and communicating with them, not being shy and sort of, putting myself out there and talking to people. It's amazing what it accomplished for me.
Oh yeah, I think that's probably a really important part, but also quite daunting because for a lot of people, that idea of, especially after a pandemic where we've been told to separate from people, but learning how to connect online, but also learning how to connect in person, and these are really difficult kind of social skills that are really important in just taking that little step, just actually saying out loud something that you'd like to do, whereas rather than keeping it to yourself or going, oh, that's a really good idea, or asking 10 people with the expectation that maybe 2 of them will get back to you.
Yeah.
It takes you backing yourself and having self-confidence even when you don't always feel like it, I guess.
Yes, that's a big one.
Yet you've done so much already in your career, yet you probably don't see that in the way that I see it, for example.
Yeah, I still struggle. I still haven't watched the episodes that I've heard. I can't bring myself to do it because I was so I could feel how green I was in the work that I've done for those episodes, and it
That's
just
really interesting.
it's kind of like how actors struggle to watch films that they're in. I suppose it's kind of like you see it in a different way that everyone else sees it.
I wonder if in a few years' time you'll be able to watch them all and just accept them as a piece of art and kind of detach yourself from the thing, I made that or I helped make that. Or whether it'll always be that way, whether you'll kind of be happy you did it and just want to move on to the next thing. But I think part of being creative is wanting to move on to the next thing and improve, isn't it?
It is, yeah. If anything, I've become more determined to improve what I do and learn from amazing people. I've picked up a habit of practicing every day, to try and get better. And that's it. You just look at the next episode and think, I can do better than that. And it's just constantly striving to improve.
So in terms of where you are with it now, are you in the middle of some work right now? Am I stopping you from working?
No, so I'm in I've got a break from work at the moment. I'm freelancing, so it means that there are sometimes dry spells that pop up. They'll get me on when they need me. So,
Right.
but it means I have time to focus on my personal work and take extra lessons. I'm currently practicing majesty drawing, things like that, which is a load
Really
of fun.
So how do you, if you want to improve for thinking about classes and things like that, a lot of those online though, those kind of people you kind of make contact with, and then also or just people in the industry that who can help you out with these things?
Yeah, so it's just classes that I find online. Generally, there's an amazing website called Line of Action, that has a bunch of free art resources, a bunch of figures, both human and animal, that you can draw, and it's completely for free. It's an amazing tool.
That sounds amazing. So I'm just having a look now because I'll put a link of that to that in the description so people can kind of get involved. And it literally says here, like, globally, Line of Action students have put in 677 days, 20 hours, 53 minutes, and 25 seconds of practice time in the last 7 days. So wow, that's an amazing resource.
Yeah, it's helped me an awful lot. I'm
I'll make
still
sure
not great at it, but you just got to do it every day. And
so, what is your? I think as I want to make sure that I congratulate you on your success and what you've done, because as I've been watching a couple of the episodes and watching things, I'm just like, this is amazing, and like to, be so self-deferential, I think is maybe the word for it, about it, and like, oh, it's huge, it's a massive achievement to have done these things. But what do you enjoy doing the most? What do you enjoy drawing the most? Like, what is it that like, if you were just allowed to make your own animation show from scratch and you were the head person of it, you were the Matt Groening of it or something, uh, or somebody else who I can't think of off the top of my head, what would you do? What would be your kind of style or idea? Do you kind of have things that you enjoy doing more than others? Is probably the short version of that question.
Oh, that's really hard. I'd say my biggest strength is slapstick, funny faces, funny expressions, funny poses. I love drawing all of that, and really gross things as well. I love drawing wrinkles on faces. I love drawing sort of gross close-up shots, and there are a lot of those in SpongeBob, which is really good.
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't really thought about that. Yeah, that's true. So that's the kind of perfect way of getting to do those things that you enjoy doing.
Yeah, definitely.
And that kind of takes us full circle, really, because like gross faces and gross stuff, it's kind of like a horror element to that, I guess.
Yeah, there definitely is.
I mean, I guess there's the kind of animation openings to things like Creepshow and Tales from the Crypt and all those kind of things, and the Tales from the Crypt cartoon. There's like, I find quite interesting is when you watch an animated horror feature. I know they did one in an episode of Creepshow that I saw with somebody trapped on an island. I think it's Keith Sutherland was the voice actor in it, and gradually kind of working out, kind of like Castaway, but a lot darker. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, I'm actually enjoying this more than the regular episodes. I feel like there is a real market for that. I know sometimes people hold on a lot to the zombie side of things because of the sort of the rights-free version of Night of the Living Dead that they can kind of use as inspiration. But I actually think it would be really cool to kind of see a sort of dark horror side to Britain through animation. I know there was like Monkey Dust and things like that, but it feels like there's been a while, doesn't it, since we've seen some really cool animated horror, unless I've missed it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of any off the top of my head.
No, I can't. I'm sure people be screaming at us.
No. I know this. I can see it, but
yeah. Definitely lots of artists. There's definitely lots of people who, and sculptors and things like that. And certainly when you go to conventions, or I went to one the other day, and there was a guy, and he would put you into a Rick and Morty scene. Or there was a guy from the Beano who would like put you into a different kind of scenario from things like that. That's really exciting. In fact, I've got a picture of myself in like Beano style over in the corner over there. I just think it's really fun.
I love the Beano. I grew up every Tuesday. I think it came out.
Yeah,
get the Beano every week.
Oh, I'm so glad that, like, obviously, there's kids now who are still buying it. I think it's not, or maybe it's online a bit more than it was in paper. And somebody bought me because they knew I was a big fan. The most recent, it was like a summer special or something like that. It was a while ago, and I was like, oh, I'm glad it's still going, and I'm glad people are still into it. There's no substitution for getting something through your letterbox, like that's just that excitement of just pouring over it. What sort of comics and things did you read as a child and that you maybe still into now? So is there anything either on TV and comics and or magazines that you recommend to people that you think are just like your favorites?
I'd say I'm a big fan of The Perishers, which is a newspaper comic in the Daily Mirror. I think it's still but they're reprinting it. I am a massive fan. I have all the collections. I think it's just so witty and funny, and the art style is absolutely gorgeous.
I did not expect you to say that. I think that's so maybe it's a side of cartoons that people forget, like the Fred Bassett and Hagar the Horrible, and maybe even Peanuts. But like, yeah, the Perishes, the Wizard of Id, like these ones that were in newspapers, Andy Cap.
Yeah.
Like these were all ones that like I used to buy all the collections of those, and until you said it, then I kind of forgotten how amazing they were. Yeah, they were so really cool.
It's a massive inspiration for me, and I discovered it by complete accident. You know, as a kid, sort of flicking through the newspaper. Of course, I'm attracted to the comics.
Yes.
And yeah, I just fell in love with it, and Fred Bassett as well. Even though I never touched the Daily Mail, but
no,
I fell in love with Fred Bassett.
I know exactly what you mean. Sometimes it's strange because not political reasons, but because geographical reasons. But I used to try and get hold of the Sunday Posts because they have the like our Woolly and the Bruins and things like that in them, and I really wanted to see them, and they were really hard to get hold of in Manchester. And it was like, oh man, can somebody ship the I think it's called the Fun Day Post or something like that, the little mini comic, and it's like, yeah, you'll sort of compromise any morals or anything like that just to get hold of the thing that you love, like the comic that you love. Yeah, and some of them are quite of their time, aren't they? But still really, really well written, and like you're getting about 4 or 5 panels a week or or a day, but you'll stick with it. You have that brand loyalty.
I really commend newspaper comic artists, because to think of, a strip a day. I mean, they're probably done in bulk, but I'm not actually quite sure how it works. But it's one newspaper comic a day. Probably bar Sunday.
Wow.
To be that consistent with it.
Yeah, that must be incredible. Yeah, like a lot of like a real challenge, like to say, to keep it going and tell a story over in such a short way. It must be really interesting as well, like how to keep that going and keep people interested, but still have something that's interesting within those small amount of panels. I suppose it's like a little microcosm of what you're doing with animation, where you want every single thing that you draw to be interesting and engaging for the audience.
Yeah, it is similar to making a comic, I suppose. Every shot needs to have a purpose, and it needs to push the story along.
Yeah, story's important as much as the art side of it. So I guess that's where the collaboration comes in, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
So just to say, that's really interesting. I'm glad you've kind of highlighted those newspaper ones, because I bet there's people who haven't. I'm not sure. I think they get sold. A lot of them get sold around the world and just get renamed. So I'd imagine even if people are watching who are not in the UK, they've probably seen a lot of these. And I guess the American versions like Peanuts, and things like that.
Yeah, I love Peanuts as well.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Oh, so good, so good. Yeah, I think I've still got my Snoopy money box somewhere that I had when I was a kid. It's like a silver one. Yeah, it's like you hold on to some things, you can't let go of them, But yeah, so we've kind of touched on what's happening next and how you're expressing yourself within the series. But I think what's left really is just to say, if people want to reach out to you, I know I'll put a link to your Instagram and your website on there. Is that okay? Do you encourage people to kind of say, what they like about your art and have a chat about animation with you online?
Yeah. I absolutely love that. When people take the time to acknowledge, like, hey, I like what you drew. I really like that. It really reminds you why you do it in the first place.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's lovely to hear. And so guys, I'll put that in the description. Some other links. Jen's going to send some artwork through, and I'll put that through our conversations in different places, so you can kind of see the things that she's done. And I'm just blown away by it, because I can't even draw a stick man. So like for me, it is like you're like a magician. more than an artist and more of a magician. So no, thank you so much for this time that you spent with us and explaining your role and what you do. It's fascinating, and if that doesn't inspire someone, I don't know what will. So if you love to draw, we've given you all different ideas, guys, of how to get involved. Thank you so much, Jen. Thanks for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, it's no problem at all. If anyone wants to reach out to me as well, they're more than welcome to. Any questions you might have, just shoot me a DM.
Oh, that's great. Oh, I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will, because there'll be people who want to kind of be inspired by you in the same as you were inspired by your auntie and things like that. So that's really cool. Oh, thank you so much. Thanks again.
No problem. It's been a pleasure.